everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Black Student Success Podcast brought to you by InQuire Higher. Today, joining us, we have Ewune Ewane. Welcome, Ewune.
Hi, thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm so happy to have you here. Our first question we like to ask everyone is, who are you? How would you describe yourself?
Would that be personally or professionally or both?
Or both, however you want to answer.
Okay, so my name is Ewune Ewane, as you stated. I am originally from Houston, Texas. I went to Marquette University, graduated from Marquette University, and I have spent the past 10 years educating myself on psychology, honing my craft as a therapist. I'm currently licensed in Texas as a licensed psychological associate. And personally, I love to dance, love to have fun. I have a fur baby. And I consider myself an open book. So I'm really excited to be here to talk about careers in psychology because I believe it's a relatively unknown field about the depths in which we can really contribute to society.
Oh, for sure, for sure. All right, so let's take it back, way back to your childhood. Let's see tell us about what that looked like. Not everyone grows up the same. So go ahead.
Okay.
What did that look like? What kind of support did you have growing up?
Oh, my parents. So I grew up in Houston, Texas. I was the only child for just a few years, didn't even appreciate that time. I have a younger brother, and I come from a big family. So I have a lot of cousins. My mom is one of 14. My dad is one of 8. And I probably have like over 25 cousins. They're all really close. So I grew up in a really strong family unit. My parents are originally from Cameroon, which is in Central Africa. And so we have a really strong Cameroonian community in Houston, Texas. So I grew up with a lot of people who I see as my family, even if we aren't blood related. So I really learned how to connect with people at an early age. My neighborhood was predominantly white. I grew up in a predominantly white neighborhood, went to a predominantly white church, school, the whole thing. So I would say the only Black people I interacted with for the most part was my family. And I believe that had a really interesting perspective on my development and my racial identity, my ethnic identity for one. And I learned the importance of being surrounded by people who look like you, because I remember when I went to middle school, I was just so excited because there's so many Black kids. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm no longer the only one. And my high school is diverse as well. So seeing, diversity and how it's so important even from a young age, and me not really being able to express myself verbally, but knowing that I didn't want to be the only one. I could count how many Black people were in my classroom. I think there was 2 of us, maybe a few of us in the grade. And of course, we would all collect together. And so that was, my environment. That was my little support system at school. My parents were really involved in my education. I am a proud product of public school or public education. And my parents, they supplemented my education. So Saturdays, they would still have things for us to read, still have videos for us to watch, really challenged us educationally and intellectually. So high standards always expected, A's at all times. If it's not an A, but you need to focus on it. And what that really taught me was you can always be better. And you don't have to accept your shortcomings. And it's just an opportunity to grow, and to go back to the drawing board and not accept that, oh, I'm not good at math, so to speak. Well, how can you be better? And nothing is really above you. So that was my childhood.
You had an amazing childhood, it seems like, as far as the support that you had and, parents. I can definitely relate to that. Just having, a parent who was like, okay, you got a B? Oh, okay, how can we work on this? We need to get that. We need to bump that up today. So I can definitely relate to that. But I love that you had that support and you didn't let, a B here, or if you got another grade, we're not going to talk about it. Anything lower.
I did get other grades. That would have been something else.
Yeah, right. Trust me, I understand. So, but I like how you didn't let that stop you or deter you in any way. If anything, you saw it as a challenge. And I also like that you had again, that family support is amazing that you had. Woo, you had a lot of cousins. I'm jealous.
I do. There's a lot of us, and I'm on the younger end, so now I have like nieces and nephews, and I love it. I love having a big family.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. So you said earlier that you're excited to tell us about some areas of psychology that you can pursue. What are some areas that you'd like to share with us?
Ooh, there's so many. I think most people focus on the therapy aspect, and yes, we do that. But when you go into the doctoral level, especially the PhDs, we are trained to be scientists or consultants as well as clinicians, and that's the path that I'm on. And so some of the ones that just come to the top of my mind is one of the things that I had the opportunity to do was be a consultant for legal matters. So, for example, I provided pro bono care to people within detention centers to help them apply for asylum. And I testified on their behalf in the court system to allow them to be granted asylum or to be permitted to stay in the United States under some other type of arrangement. Most people don't know that psychologists do that. And it was great because I can attest to the impacts of the trauma they've experienced, threats to humanity, civil war, people, going to different areas and trying to support themselves and, acquire safety for them and their families. And those are some of the matters how they reach the United States. And so being able to be that liaison between that person who really can't speak for themselves, or they don't have the appropriate language in the court system, to being someone that they trust and see as an expert to kind of put the pieces together and really show what that looks like. So that's one of the proudest things that I've been able to do, and we don't charge the people, like we're there just to provide the service for them and to support them. So that's one of the things psychologists do. Another thing that we do, which falls more into like our research aspect, is we're really entrenched within the government. So we actually have quite a few fellowships. And fellowships are like 1 to 2 year contracts that are strenuous training opportunities. But you're a full professional and you get paid like a full professional, benefits and all of that. It's not a long-term position. But we do have fellowships within the White House, for example. So we have one for a psychologist who works under the VP. And we travel with them and we assist them in policy development. And how we do that is by going through the research of whatever interest or topic they're interested in and putting it together and providing clinical recommendations on how we can change this issue. That is something psychologists do. Most people don't know that. Again, we're also within different branches of the government as well. Again, assisting with policy development, helping develop the strategies and arguments for certain changes in legislation or laws, for example. So those are some of the things that we do in the government. Within other areas, we're in the schools assisting with students. We also can be in private practice, for example. One way we're really budding is within corporate world. People are finding that there is a need for corporate psychologists to help not only with the corporate environment, but the ramifications of the job. So, for example, when we think about YouTube, and YouTube, as we all know, you can upload anything you want to upload to YouTube, right? And sometimes some of that material can be graphic and contain really inappropriate things like crimes against people, children, for example. And the people at YouTube have to review those videos, all of them, and then, provide a certain rating on them, right? Or take them down. And so those people who are viewing the material, they're constantly being exposed to inappropriate, graphic, and traumatic videos on a daily basis. What happens to those people? So they have a psychologist come in to, one, develop, a trauma-informed care program for their employees, and then be there to assist with like at-risk assessments, for example. So that's another thing that we do. So it's honestly, the options are endless. And one thing that I've heard a lot is, there's no money in psychology, and it's really not true. There are so many opportunities, but I don't think we do a good enough job on our end as the people in these areas to kind of show like, this is what else you can do if you're not interested in therapy. It's a great skill to have. I definitely think it improves your communication skills tremendously. And that's something that you need in being a consultant, for example, being able to connect with a person, understand them, communicate with them in their language, for example. All those clinical skills definitely are transferable to different arenas. So I think we can do a better job, but the options are truly endless. But those are just some of the highlighted ones in addition to, a hospital setting or private practice and things like that.
Thank you for shedding light on what you can do in psychology. Yes, the options are endless, and some of those areas I didn't even know existed. I didn't even think about psychology in the corporate realm. But you're right. Yes, that's definitely needed there. That is trauma that they're definitely experiencing on a daily basis. And I like that you kind of highlighted how there's this misconception about not being able to make a nice salary when it comes to being a psychologist, because I agree with you for 1000%. That's not true. Any psychologist that I have spoken to about their journey also talks about the different areas that they work in as well, in conjunction with therapy, if that's their base. So I definitely thank you for shedding light on that. So take us through like your college journey. First highlight, did you always know that you wanted to be a psychologist? Or was this something that kind of sparked when you were at Marquette? Did you switch majors? Talk about that a little bit.
So short answer, no, I did not always want to be a psychologist. I was always interested in being a doctor of some form. So I've always been interested in healthcare. When I went to Marquette, when I started there, the goal was actually to be a brain surgeon. Like, I am amazed by the brain and all the things. I mean, it runs everything, right? And it's amazing. And that's what I wanted to do. I was not, what's the word I'm looking for? I wasn't thrilled about the education and required for a surgeon, because you have never seen a young surgeon. And there's a reason for that. There's a lot of school. And even though they do their 4 years like everyone else, there's a lot of training after that. And of course, there's a reason why, because you are entering people's bodies and doing certain things. And we need to be absolutely positively sure that you know what you're doing. I definitely get that. But that long process definitely was deterring for me. And so I was like, okay, what else can I do? Then I considered being a pediatrician because I love kids. And I had an opportunity to shadow pediatricians, but it's difficult because you're seeing children in a different light. You're not seeing them having fun. You're seeing them sick and hurt. And that's not something that I could personally deal with on a day-to-day basis. So I was like, I can interact with children on my own time, in my own way. But in that capacity, I don't have that emotional strength to be there with them in those type of times. So I decided against that. I'd always been curious about psychology, but when I brought it up to my parents originally, they're like, absolutely not. They're like, no, we're not paying that kind of money for Marquette for you to major in psychology. So I decided that I would be a chemist, and I was really interested in being a part of the process to develop, at the time, an effective treatment for HIV. That was my interest, and that was something I was really, really excited about. Obviously, things were happening in the background that I wasn't aware of. And so they have the cocktail and PrEP and all those phenomenal things now. And when I found out about them, I just didn't think that I could really make a contribution, a meaningful contribution in that way. And I just decided to go behind my parents' back and major in psychology.
Oh my God.
And when they find out about it, they're just like, okay, whatever, just do what you want. But I loved it. And I felt that there were amazing opportunities of growth because of all the gaps in psychology. One of them being about multiculturalism in their understanding of people of color, generally speaking. And then when we whittle it down or funnel it down to certain racial groups, for example, and I'm going to focus on, the Black race, there was a lot of overgeneralization and a lack of understanding of all the intricate cultures that exist within the Black diaspora. And I definitely felt that there was an opportunity for me to grow because there was limited information. One of the things that really stood out to me was a focus on biculturalism. And it really spoke to me because I felt that's how I've been trying to explain myself to be all of my life. in that, I balance being Cameroonian and being American, day in and day out, and all the code switching that I do. But in literature or psychological literature, biculturalism is only extended to people of Spanish speaking nations who identify as like Latinx or as Hispanic, for example. But they don't see that a Black person could be bicultural or could have more cultures, because Black is just one thing, even though we know it is not. And so just seeing that and just knowing how that spoke to me, and it really put into words how I felt my whole life, that's what I wanted to do for other people, and push the narrative even further. And so those are one of my research interests. It's just developing multiculturalism as it applies to the Black diaspora, and really, honing in on the key differences. And yes, there are similarities, of course, but the key differences that exist between the major cultures within that, and what we as clinicians or what we as researchers can do to ensure that we're not harming people in that process. And we're using that information to inform us with how to support them and whatever their needs are. That's just how I started. And I am forever thankful to the McNair Scholar Program for that, because I used that study to help me go to graduate school, where I had an opportunity to work on studies that were similar, like racial identity development, ethnic identity development. And then even in my PhD, it changed a little bit because I began to focus on health disparities and kind of looking at the long-term consequences of racism. Because when we think about racism or everyday discrimination, and that could be in what we see on TV, what we see on the internet, the comments we see, on different social media platforms, those have an impact on a person, and it's not just on their mental stability. Because we say this, but I don't think people truly understand, and I didn't truly understand it until my PhD, was stress can literally and will kill you, literally. It breaks down your body's ability to fight other diseases, and it makes you vulnerable and susceptible to getting sick. Your immune system is compromised, and it doesn't have the ability to do what it's supposed to do. And that comes from stress more than anything else. And the impact of discrimination and racism and prejudice is far more significant than what we know. And so in my PhD, that's when I had an opportunity to, again, look at how ethnic identity or racial identity can sometimes be a buffer to those effects, or just kind of mitigate some of the impacts of discrimination or racism and things like that. But the view of people of color within psychology is still relatively new. Again, I started in this in 2008. This is 2021. And there's some things coming out and steam is picking up, but there's still a lot to overcome, because unfortunately, I guess this field is just like any other field, there's a lot of racism in this field. There's a lot of prejudice in this field. There's a lot of sexism, all the isms is here. And you wouldn't think so because of the way psychology tries to present themselves. But, as a person on the inside, I'll tell you, it's not what it presents itself to be. Okay. We follow the medical model. And when you think of the medicine and how it developed and how it prioritized the white man as the standard of living, right, it's blueprint. The same concept for psychology. Oh. And so now what we're trying to do is retroactively undo all of that harm that we've done.
Thanks for giving us that inside information. So I guess what advice would you give to another Black student who is thinking of pursuing psychology?
I would say start building your network now. You'll need the network. It's never too early. And there's a lot of networks on social media, like Facebook, for example. They have like Black graduate students in psychology. I'm sure there's some on Twitter as well. There's a lot of things happening on Twitter that I can't even keep up with, but there's a lot of communities. And so I would definitely say, one, build that community and just start connecting with other students like you. One. Mm-hmm. The important thing for that is most students have a connection with some professional somewhere. We all have someone that we know who kind of operates as like a mentor, who kind of like looks out and advises. And from that, I would say try to connect with some of those people and ask them about their experiences in the program and where they went. because as I said, there's a lot of isms in psychology, and you want to find a program that is supportive of their students of color. And no one will tell you that better than an alum. So you want to find an alum and have them tell you about their experience. And they'll be honest because they have nothing to lose versus a current student who may be uneasy because they do have things to lose. Like the information they share can get back that they said it, and there could be repercussions for that. But an alum, they're out, they're good to go. So they can tell you everything. So I would definitely say build your network. And if you're interested in going to a certain school or even a certain focus, just kind of put a word out, put a post out. And typically, graduates, we tend to keep an eye on that type of stuff and just look out for each other. It's a really small community, of Black psychologists or psychologists of color. And so someone knows someone. And we definitely try to be a support system because we understand what that process is like. So that would be my first thing. It's just try to build a network and get some information on the programs you're interested in. And not just about the support, but also about the training opportunities. How does the training program respond to the needs, the growing needs of the student body? Are they flexible? Right? Like, do they bend and pull depending on what the current situations are asking for? Or are they more fixed and which are like, this is the way we do things, this is the way we'll continue to do things, and either you're with it or you're not. I would say the more flexible one is better because this is a field that is growing and breathing. And in that, flexibility helps. Being fixed can have some problems down the line. So I would say there to start there, talk to people, talk to, them about their experiences, what the program is like, and then figure out what you want to do. There's a lot of things to do. Figure out what you want to do because most PhD programs, they follow what we call the mentor model, meaning you come in under a single faculty member and that faculty member guides you through the program. So what helps you find that faculty member is having aligned interest. And they don't have to be super on point, but there should be some overlap. So my advisor, he was interested in, people within the Black diaspora, myself as well. He was really in tune with the different cultures that exist. I was as well. But he was more emphasis on health disparities. I didn't have that, but again, it doesn't have to be a super overlap, but there has to be some consistency. And so we had that, and that's how I was able to work with him. So it doesn't have to be perfect, but there has to be some commonality because you will really be in a relationship with this person for about 5 to 7 years. So it helps if you have some common interests. But yeah, so figure out what you want to do and then and what is your twist? What is your spin? Some people think that they have to be just what their mentor is to be recognized. And I say that's actually not true because then they want to know, what are you going to add? I know what I do and I'm already doing it. But what are you going to do that's a little bit different? So you don't want to be just like them. You want to have your own pool because even though they are your mentor and there is a hierarchical relationship, at some level you are colleagues. And you are there to support their research and you are there to make their research better. So what is going to be your contribution to make the research better? What can they learn from you? And there can definitely be bilateral learning. Absolutely. So I would just say kind of think about that. I had one young lady speak to me and she was really interested in, Black immigrants and Islam. And I was like, that's perfect. Racial identity and religion, go for it. How do those things work together? We don't do a lot of that either, right? We mainly focus on Christians or the different aspects of the Christian faith. We don't really do a lot on Islam, and we definitely don't apply Islam to Blacks. So there's a lot of room for that. So I would just say, find what you're interested in and then find someone who's similar. So for her, I was like, find someone who focuses on religion and racial identity or social identities, right? Because race is a social construct. So even social identities, it can still fall into that. And that would be perfect. But your little twist would be Black Muslims, for example. So kind of think about it that way. What can you do differently? And for me, mine was, the biculturalism, the impact of that, because that's not something people look into. It's a great time to get into psychology because there's a lot of room for growth.
For sure. And just during this the current time, the pandemic time is when we're recording this. Do you feel like there's more need for psychologists right now? And do you foresee it growing even, I guess, at a faster rate than in the past over the next 5 to 10 years?
Absolutely. So I tell people I have never been busier than I've been during this pandemic. Like, I'm exhausted.
Wow.
I am exhausted, honestly. And I'm envious of people who have breaks because I don't have them. If you see me having a break, that means I'm actually not doing something and I'm consciously deciding not to work. But it's never been a busier time, especially if you have those clinical skills. So that's one thing I would like to say. Not every psychologist will have the clinical skills. So there are some concentrations that focus primarily on research. And those tend to be social psychologists, experimental psychologists, for example. That's just off the top of my head. Those who tend to have the balance of the two, or who have an emphasis between research and clinical, tend to be the clinical psychologists or the counseling psychologists or the school psychologists. So if you have a preference for one over the other, those are directions you can go. If you aren't sure, I would definitely say go to one that provides both. And then when you become a professional, you can always pick what you want to do. And I think that's the great thing about our field. You don't have to be married to anything. You can really just get exposure to many different experiences. And once you graduate, just really do what you want to do. And there's no issue with that. I chose to do counseling psychology because I just wanted to be more employable. You know, if needed, I could do clinical. If needed, I could do research. I just thought that made me more well-rounded. And yeah, so definitely the clinical aspect was really, really needed, you know, with COVID. And again, I was busy and turning down cases because I was like, I'm working 12-hour days and that's not healthy. And that means if I'm tired, then I'm not able to be fully present for this person who needs me for this time. So yeah, super busy. I definitely think there is room to growth within the 5 to 10 years, not just for researchers, but for the clinicians. You know, there's been a lot of talk about police brutality, and even beyond that, a non-emergency 911, that's for at crises moments. So people who are having like mental episodes, for example, that is where psychologists would be really strong. Again, because we have those communication skills that I don't have to put my hands on anyone to get them to respond to me. You know, and unfortunately, people who struggle with more serious mental illness, they have been villainized to be violent or aggressive people or dangerous people. And that's actually not the case. I tell people all the time, I've worked in just about every environment. And when I was working with those with serious mental illness, I was never afraid for my safety. And if anything, you're more so concerned about what they could do to themselves more than what they can do to other people. And yes, we do have those outliers, but that's why they're outliers. But the norm are, you know, just scared and they just need help and they need support. And so having someone who understands that, I think is better going in, because even if they're yelling curse words or things like that, they're honestly just words and they may not even know what they're saying. And so you won't internalize that or take that as, okay, this is a threat and something's going to happen, versus this person, is not aware, like there's an incongruence between reality and how their mind is working and how their mind is communicating with them. And, you know, one of the signs of SMI is what we call word salad, where they just throw out random words that don't even make sense. So if you think of a salad with many different pieces, it's the same concept. It's just different things that aren't unrelated. They don't make any sense. And it can include some curse words. And so having that concept, they're just saying stuff and they're probably trying to say something, but there's a disconnect. And so having someone who understands that and has the communication skill training to de-escalate a situation for a person who is detached from reality, there's going to be a lot of opportunity for that, especially when you hear what the legislation is talking about and what they're looking for. It definitely seems like it's shifting within the next 5 to 10 years in that direction. Wow. Because right now I know that, well, in Houston, that's where I was trained. In Houston, they have psychologists go with the firefighters. And so they go to wherever the fire is and they help the family in that time. And they also help the firefighters as well because they see a lot, right? And so that's one aspect of it. Or I also know in Houston, we do have a few psychologists who work with the HPD, Houston Police Department. Again, riding out with them at times, making sure things are okay, connecting with the staff. So I don't think this is something that is widespread, but knowing that it's happened here and it's doing really well and people respond well to it, I definitely foresee that, being implemented in other places.
Wouldn't that be amazing? I know we need something like that over here in Chicago, so that would be amazing if that was implemented everywhere. Thank you so much for sharing that. And if you didn't know, Ewune has her own podcast called Minds Over Melanin. You want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, thank you. I wasn't expecting that. So the platform is Minds Over Melanin, and it's my baby, and it's one of the ways in which I'm really developing, the needs that I've noticed in the field. And so right now we do have a web series called Reflections in Color, Celebrating Journeys to Wellness, in which we showcase all the different aspects of life that everyday people experience and how that has the potential to, take you into different places within your mental wellness. So we cover intimate partner violence. We cover divorce. We cover being diagnosed with a serious illness, for example, and how those situations can bring depressive mood, right? And how it isn't just something that comes, right? Sometimes, but there are life situations that could bring those emotional responses, and normalizing that process is so important. Like, yes, if your life is, out of order and you're going through a divorce or you're dealing with an illness that completely changes the way that you're allowed to eat and, live, right? It's normal to be depressed about it. It's normal to be unhappy about it. And that's okay. And it's actually appropriate provided the situation. And then just having that person tell their story and give like real life examples on how they were able to, get themselves back together, whether that was going to therapy or using positive coping skills, reframing their thinking, so many different things, but how they responded to that moment. That's what we kind of do. And then in addition to that, Minds Over Melanin provides, psychoeducation. We're developing a fund to help people to pay for their therapy services. So if you're interested in donating, that link will be up sooner than later. And, just trying to change what psychology looks like, adding shades of color and, identifying that we are here and, giving opportunities for those who don't have a voice to speak up and assert what their needs are and to be supported.
I love that. It's a whole community of a loving community. It sounds like that you've created over there. I love that. I will be donating, and I will make sure we we link your information in the description if anyone wants to catch that as well. All right. Of course. Let's move into the fun questions, as we call them. There are a couple. Answer how you wish. But all right, let's start with the first one. The first one is, what's the number one rite of passage that you think all college students should go through? Some common answers are going broke. I feel like getting locked out sucks. What's something that you think is
rite of passage would definitely be an all-nighter in which you didn't do anything until 5 o'clock in the morning.
Ooh, so I love that
hanging out with your friends, talking and chatting, thought you were really doing something, and 5 o'clock hits and you realize that you still only have one page of a paper written and it's due at 8.
That's perfect, because you talk about it. Oh yes, I feel like that was a thing in college. I'm going to pull an all-nighter, and what are you guys doing until 5 a.m.?
So waste of time. You're sick the rest of the day, and who knows what you wrote. So yeah, that's definitely a rite of passage, something I will never do again, but I definitely did a lot of them in college.
No. Okay, Marquette was tough. All right, and then what's an embarrassing thing that has happened to you during any part of your schooling?
Ooh, let me see. Because if anything, I blocked it out. That's one coping.
That's your coping mechanism.
Embarrassing things, they didn't happen. These people are not thinking about you. That's what I tell myself at times. I would say, I remember one was, I was in high school, I was a senior, and I was like just really cute. And I was walking through the lunchroom and people were looking at me. And so I thought it was because I looked really cute, and it wasn't. It was because my backpack was open and all my stuff was falling out little by little.
Oh, so you're leaving a trail.
Yes. And one of my friends came up to me and she was like, your backpack's open. And I was like, what? And I just turned around and everything is just out there. And yes, that's why people are looking at me. So yeah, it was really embarrassing, especially because I was really shy in high school too. So one of the ways I was like, those people are not thinking about that. They're thinking about their personal embarrassing moments.
Exactly.
No one's thinking about you. It's fine.
About the trail that you left behind. Hey, it's happened to all of us. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Ewune. It was a pleasure having you here. Thank you so much for your guidance and just insight into the realm of psychology and the different areas that you can pursue. So thank you so much. We'll leave her information in the description where to find her. Any last words?
No, this was fun. Thank you so much for the opportunity. I really like what you guys are doing because there's definitely a need for that because no one talks about all the careers that exist, right? We just talk about doctor, lawyer, engineer, firefighter, just the general stuff. And those are great. But there's so many more. And I think that's great. I think that's something that could really help people, pick appropriate majors and really understand what is possible with that major.
For sure. Thank you so much, Ewune. All right. Until next time, everyone. Bye-bye.